Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar for Zero Trust and Best Practices for Securing Endpoint Applications. My name is Juha Haapsaari from Centero, and I'll be your host today on this webinar. And this webinar is a continuum for our previous webinar that was a Zero Trust related also. And also today we have a very special guest with us today. So Sami Laiho is joining us also on this webinar. So hello, Sami.
Hey everyone, super happy to be back.
Very nice. So before we will let Sami to go, I will shortly go through the agenda for this webinar and also go through some survey results here. So then after the survey results, we will let Sami to continue and tell you everything about Zero Trust and how to protect applications using allow listing, AppLocker, and so on. And after Sami's part, I will tell you a little bit about how to actually update the applications that you allow in your organization and what kind of tools you have available for that. And at the end of the webinar, we have the questions and answers section here. And throughout all the webinar, please send always the questions to the chat. And there's a question area there. So anytime you are able to post a question there, and we will go through at least some of the questions at the end of the webinar then. So before we let Sami to continue, let's have a look a little bit about the results of the survey that we sent to the LinkedIn before this session. So we asked you two questions. One was, have you ever used AppLocker in your organization? And yeah, many of the organizations already are using that. Some have already been using the AppLocker, but currently not using. But the most of the respondents said that they know what AppLocker is, but haven't used that one. So today we will have an excellent information. What is the AppLocker there and how to actually use it to protect your applications and kind of do the Zero Trust functionality there. And also the other question was for allow listing. Have you used allow listing or especially does it increase, in your opinion, the workload on the organization? And most of the respondents says that yes, if you are going to do allow listing, it will increase your workload. And that is something that we will go also through today, and hopefully we are able to get these numbers around after this webinar session. All right, but now, any further ado, Sami, the stage is yours.
All right. Just get my screen shared to you guys, and there we go. So, as said, today we are going to talk about Zero Trust and especially application management when it comes to one of the Zero Trust principles. And just as a quick introduction of myself, if I can get my slides changing, that would be great. So just for the question there, as an answer straight to it, we will go through how we can make whitelisting or allow listing, as it's nowadays called, work seamlessly but very easy to manage. And then we are going to give you some tips and tricks. We are going to share these slides afterwards, and I think you should get your hands on those because there's going to be quite a few slides about tips and tricks that you can use afterwards, but we might necessarily not be able to go through these during the session today. So make sure you go back and get those slides as well. Everything that we're going to talk about is really relying on the first principle of Zero Trust, which is the principle of least privilege. So when you have gotten rid of your end user admin rights, that's the time when whitelisting becomes very easy. So I would not say that it is mandatory, but if you want to make it secure and easy to manage, then you should always have the principle of least privilege before you start with this. And then after this, as said, I leave it to Juha. Short introduction, if you have not seen my sessions before, my name is Sami Laiho. I'm a Microsoft MVP, core operating system. I specialize in troubleshooting and Windows internals. And for the past 6-7 years, I've been talking about security of the Windows operating system. I've been concentrating on how the operating system works and learning Windows internals, and I just ended up being very good at finding different weaknesses because I know where to look for. I also, in general, hate security sessions. When I go to sessions are always built like there's someone on stage telling you that I will hack you like this, 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 I will hack you like this. And then everyone walks out of the room thinking like, oh, my company sucks, we're so bad. Also, people don't concentrate on how to mitigate things. And also they have absolutely improper configurations of the operating system. I spent last night talking on Twitter about PowerShell weaknesses. And PowerShell itself really doesn't have weaknesses that much. It's not PowerShell's fault, but PowerShell is the most used mechanism. And I'm also going to give you some tips on how to handle PowerShell as well. So that will be a extra tip that I just decided to add last night because of that Twitter storm that I caused. So I would say that if you would have to choose one thing to make your environment more secure, then I would say it is application allow listing or whitelisting. I'm sorry, I'm going to mess this up many times of which term I'm going to use, because terms like whitelisting and blacklisting are not allowed terms nowadays. Like same as for disks, you can't call them master and slave disks anymore. Those are forbidden terms, which means that I am really sorry and I'm going to apologize already for messing this up, because I will be talking about allow listing probably about 1 out of 2 times during this next 40 minutes or so. But that's it about me. What I do day to day, as said, I deliver a lot of security sessions and I used to travel a lot. Now I'm stuck in my basement, have been stuck here for a year now, a little bit more than a year actually. But what I do is I actually teach security. And now there's so many of you that returned from the previous session. I don't want you to think that I'm going to tell you exactly the same stories. And what I'm going to tell you today is I'm just going to make sure that we get good reviews of the webinar. And I got a tip, which is that someone said you should add nudity. Well, okay, that's a joke. But someone did ask me after last time, we got a lot of feedback, and someone asked me like, what about Sami's internal stuff and why isn't Sami doing any tips on the sessions? So I do want to reply to that feedback. And I do a lot of 45 life hacks of Windows in 45 minutes and such. I know Mikko is watching this, so I'll have to ask Mikko. I will have to thank Mikko for this tip. But what I do day to day is not just security. I also dig into the operating system, and I think that's why I have a very different view on the whole application control topic than most security people do. So day to day, whenever I have a chance, like now it's summer and I'm going to have my summer vacation. During my summer vacation, when I get to choose what I want to do on my free time, it's actually reading advanced Windows debugging. And I spend a lot of time with the operating system. I'm also trying to hunt down the weirdest tips and tricks I can find. And I think this is one of the weirdest tips and tricks I've found in such a long time. I don't know if you've ever tested it out, but for example, Task Manager, if you open up Task Manager and it saves the original, or it saves your current state and the layout of the app itself. But in the Task Manager source code, there is actually a hidden switch. Not like hitting Shift key and something like many things in Windows, but in this case you have to press Control Alt Shift while you're starting Task Manager and it will actually reset. But this one, thanks Mikko. If you have the task switcher, you know, the cool new one, like this one on the screen, do you know that you can actually change it to a classic one with just one button? So if you keep pressing your Alt and you hit Tab, this happens. But while you keep your Alt pressed, What if you press the other Alt? Okay. I don't think I've seen such a weird tip in a long time. So thanks, Mikko, for that. But that's what I do a lot. I hunt down really silly things in the operating system. But as said, I think that gives me a very different perspective. If you want to keep up to date with the tips and tricks and stuff like that, and if you want to be secure with your AppLocker implementation, for example, you have to be on Twitter. So make sure that you have a Twitter account, and I hope you follow me as well. All right. You have to remember that we started to talk about this during the first webinar already. I have a link for you in just a second, and so that you can get back to it if you need to. There are certain things that I rely to be present before we start doing anything like this here, okay? So there are certain things that you can't miss if you want to keep Windows secure. So there is no security in Windows unless you have BitLocker on your endpoints. So you have to have hard disk encryption. There is no more of only laptops get BitLocker. Okay, everyone gets BitLocker, whether it's a workstation at your office or whether it's a laptop that you're traveling with. So there are certain things that we need to have there. The second biggest rule of Windows since 1993 is that you should not have admin rights, okay? So the principle of least privilege. That's what we call proactive security. I think Benjamin Franklin once said it very well, that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I actually went around the world for 6 years telling everyone that Benjamin Franklin was talking about penicillin. And about a year ago, I heard from a student that he was actually talking about fires. Fair enough. Anyway, he was not talking about IT security, but it applies very well to IT security. So we should concentrate on proactive measures, because the problem today is that every day there is more than 1 million pieces of new malware variants found. So 1 million pieces of malware found per day. Many people think that whitelisting is difficult, because when I go to meetings where we're starting to deploy whitelisting, which by the way is the most recommended security feature by Gartner as well, not just Sami Laiho. But anyway, when we start building this, we go to the first meetings, I always hear the same thing. But Sami, we have more than 1,200 applications in program files. Even 1,200, if you needed to list that, think about that. You list them once. I have an average customer with 8,000 endpoints. They add one rule per month after that. They don't add 1,200 in the beginning, but I'll show you how you can limit that from 1,200 to only one. But also they only add one per month. So that makes 12 additions per year. Compare that to adding 1 million additions per day. So AppLocker is a very lazy option instead of being a difficult option like many people think. But it will never ever be easy to manage unless you have the principle of least privilege. Now, zero trust itself, remember, it is not a negative thing. It sounds like a really bad thing because it's zero and trust, and it sounds like Big Brother, and it sounds like we'll be watching you, and we don't even nowadays when we hire people, we're already thinking they're liars and we don't trust them. That's not the thing at all, okay? So zero trust is a very positive thing. Zero trust wants to bring you the possibility of working exactly the same as securely as ever from a location you desire, from any location you desire. So whether you're at the cafeteria somewhere or you're at the office network, everything will be as secure and easy to use. I think everyone wants that. I don't think anyone has anything against the fact that you could work exactly like you do from the office nowadays from anywhere. But zero trust somehow sounds very negative. If you want to dig in to this a little bit more, there's a lot of good resources at Microsoft. So if you go to microsoft.com and search for zero trust, for example, you can find a lot of information about it. The very core concepts we've gone through in the first session, so I'm not gonna go through this that much, but I will give you a link to go back to if you want to, okay? So with this link, we can post it on the chat later on as well, and you can also get it from the material when you get a link from us later on how to get that material. And you can go and check the first webinar. We had almost 3,000 attendees registered and more than 700 online at a time. So it was a very, very successful, and hopefully we'll have those numbers again. And many of you are back. Anyway, if you ask me how to build a secure environment, one of the core concepts of this was the principle of least privilege, and that's what we went through the last time. This time, what we're going to concentrate on is the application control part. All right. We can't forget these things. Everything starts with having knowledge of what you're securing. So you have to remember that the most important things in your security feature set is up-to-date hardware inventory and up-to-date software inventory, because you can't protect unless you know what you are protecting or what you need to protect. So you have to keep that in mind, that inventory is very many times forgotten as the most important security feature there is. And then we have things like BitLocker principle of least privilege that I already mentioned, and then we head for the next one. And this time that will be allow listing. Okay. So whether you call it allow listing, whether you call it whitelisting, whatever, there are a lot of myths to it. And we're going to start busting some myths first. Okay. So the first myth is more manpower needed. This is what I hear all the time. I go to a meeting where we're starting a whitelisting project, allow listing project, or we are in general trying to make a company's security posture better. And we start talking about this. And the first comment is, Sami, can you verify one thing first? We have decided that we're going to hire 2 new people so that we can take care of AppLocker. And I always say, I totally disagree. You might have to fire a few people, because if you implement AppLocker, for example, it'll take down the amount of work you need to do, because you have a more tight environment where you have less things to take care of. You can focus on those that you have chosen to protect instead of trying to protect everything. Plus, you will save that time many, many times from the reactive side of things. I think the best sales pitch and the best ever feedback I've gotten was from an ex-boss of mine. And he was, I had been building their environment a decade ago, or actually now it's 2 decades ago. I built everything for them. And now they were getting a new CTO. I hadn't been there for like a decade at that time, and they had a new CTO. And the old CTO called me and said, Sami, can you come here and explain why everything is built like it is? Because we can explain the technical things, but we can't explain the story behind it. We can't explain why we chose to do things like we do here. And he started taking, I said, of course, absolutely. That's like the best. That's so fun to go and explain why I decided to do something in the beginning of 2000 and why I am so happy I did. So I went there and I started explaining how their wireless is built, how their LANs are built, how their networks in general are built, how Active Directory is built, how AS400 was replaced with SAP and blah, 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 all that stuff, like the bigger picture. And then at some point I mentioned that, well, the good thing is that we don't really have that much malware because we have AppLocker. And the guy said, sorry. I have to interrupt you here. Did you say AppLocker? It's like, yeah. We have to get rid of it. I have so bad experience with it. We have to get rid of it. And that's when my ex-boss said, please follow me. And he took us to a monitoring room, which had huge screens of everything that's going on in the IT environment. One of them being F-Secure's monitor, which showed us like the alerts and incidents in security. And then he said, please look at this monitor. And the new guy was looking at the monitor and he was like, I don't get it. I mean, there's nothing there. And that's when my ex-boss said, exactly, that's my point. Let's go forward. I mean, you can save that time from doing reactive security 10 times over. compared to what you need to spend on proactive security. Maybe one good thing a day to add compared to 1 million things per day to add. You can choose your front. I choose to be lazy. Allow listing is difficult because of thousands of apps. No, because we do not list apps. If you start listing apps, that's a horrible thing to do, okay? So stop doing that. You're supposed to list containers instead of items. Don't say we allow 800 apps from program files. No, you say we allow everything from program files and you prevent people from adding anything to program files, okay? I have been building a whitelist on my machine since 2001. And so that's exactly 20 years now. And my list that I use on my personal machine, which is a very, very difficult machine because I run all the stuff on this single machine and I have a one-man company. I do everything on my laptop and this is my list, okay? So it basically fits on one screen. When I started the project with City of Helsinki, our capital, we had 8,000 lines on the list. And when I was done, we had 72. Can do it in very, very different ways. Allow listing requires enterprise version of Windows, the last myth for now to bust. No, you don't. You can do AppLocker with Windows 10 Professional if you are using Intune. So that's a perk that you can get if you invest in Intune. You can get AppLocker without the enterprise. And you can always use software restriction policies, which is still usable even today for Windows 10. I actually have a customer that uses Windows 10 software restriction policies, the old version, even while they are having enterprise version. So they decided to use that instead of AppLocker. I would not recommend that in general scenarios, but so in some cases, why not? But just the main idea here is don't give up on whitelisting because you don't have enterprise. Okay. Every project starts with logging, but Windows luckily has a logging mechanism in place, which is for free. It can serve theoretically up to 50,000 clients, but I have it in an environment that has 550,000 nodes, although we have to do some steps there, have some servers talking to other servers and stuff like that. So some ladders going up from a country to a continent and so on, but it's doable even for bigger environments, and it's not a kid's toy. Many people say that you need to have Splunk or Graylog or things like that, but you don't. You can do this with, if you have, of course, like Azure Log Analytics, or if you have Splunk, why not? I mean, that's in place, use that. But you can do this for free as well. So event log forwarding is in Windows since Windows Vista, and it is for free. Easily up to 20,000 clients can talk to a single collector. It is group policy configured and requires WinRM. So if you have PowerShell working in your network, this will work as well. Then you have to choose your allow listing solution. So as said, Windows does have different options. Even NT4 and Windows 2000 had a special way of allowing only certain executables, but that was really difficult because it was based on executable names. It was easy to circumvent because it had only the executable names. So you just change the name and nothing would apply. And also it was only for user side, so you couldn't say that this computer is more important than the next computer because it's a kiosk machine. You couldn't do things like that. It was always based on the user's identity. And it could not do containers. So you would end up with 8,000 lines quite easily. To make this easier, Windows XP and Server 2003 introduced software restriction policies. And this is the first working version of whitelisting or allow listing. And this came out in a bad time, I'd say. So 2005-ish was the first time when everyone wanted to introduce whitelisting, and that was the time when everyone was talking about executable names, and even worse, hash values. You have to have a hash value of every binary you're running. People ended up with thousands of rules, and whenever you had Patch Tuesday, you would create the rules again. And to be honest, almost everyone hated whitelisting. Well, Windows 7 introduced AppLocker, if you create AppLocker rules and look at the registry, they are written to a key called SRPv2, Software Restriction Policy version 2. But because software restriction policy had such a bad reputation, Microsoft wanted people to give it another try. So they, at the very last moment before releasing Windows 7, they rebranded it as AppLocker. Okay, but it is SRPv2, Software Restriction Policy version 2. That's the most usable one. Windows 10 Enterprise introduced a thing called Device Guard, nowadays known as Windows Defender Application Control. I'll throw in a few words about that one as well. Even now, I could say mostly just stay away from it. And then we have a lot of third-party options as well. So there's a lot of tools that will give you the same kind of mechanism, and it can work on Pro as well. So, or they can work on Pro as well. I don't need to choose for you what product or what feature you need to use. What I'm talking about here are principles. What I'm talking about here are concepts, okay? Not trying to sell you anything, but I want you to have the concept of allow listing in place. There are some common things that are the same, whether you have any of these allow listing solutions, okay? So first of all, it is the most effective way of increasing your company's security, so you should really invest in it. Few years ago, I would mainly do projects for my customers about how to get rid of admin rights. And now I'm even more doing projects about AppLocker. These happen every week. I have multiple of these happening. If you need help in getting an easy to use AppLocker in your environment, it's a 4-day project for me, and I am more than happy to sell my services for you. Just get in contact afterwards. Effective allow listing works only when combined with the principle of least privilege. Think about this. You say, let's allow everything from Windows and program files, and then you take away admin rights. How would you run malware on the machine? In theory, you wouldn't, because limited users could not put anything in program files or Windows. But if they're admins, they can put anything they want in Windows or program files. Although it would be doable, one of the immutable laws of Windows security is that Windows can't enforce any security if you give people end user admin rights. No built-in reporting in native options. I mean, if you use AppLocker software restriction policy, you will have to take care of logging and alerting yourself, but that can be done with the Windows event log collector or event log forwarding. Allow listing is a security barrier, deny listing is not. If you're serious about security, don't come to me saying that, oh, we have AppLocker, but we only use blacklisting, because that's not security, that's compliance. I mean, that's fine for you to say we won't allow Office versions older than this. It's fine for sometimes extinguishing fires. Let's not allow this Chrome version. But that's more compliance, because you would have to list 1 million things per day. And that's something that is actually done by your antivirus currently. So leave that antivirus stuff to your Windows Defender or whatever you're using. For servers, things are a little different. So what I'm going to talk about now really applies to endpoints, which means either workstations or Citrix RDS sessions. Of course, they are used like clients. But servers, we have to treat a little different, because servers many times have admins logging on to them. So software restriction policy is the oldest one. If you want to test it out, I thought I'll show you a very brief example of it. So I have a few machines here. I'm going to do the old way with the old machine. So if you open up, in this case, I'll just use the local GP edit, which there we go. And you go for Windows settings and security settings. And there you have two things: software restriction policies version 1 and software restriction policy version 2. So we are going to use the old one, and we're going to say just right-click new software restriction policies. We're going to set a few basic settings. This will apply to all binary. This will apply to all users except admins, because they can't do it anyway. I mean, they can always bypass the rules. Enforce certificate rules. Note, certificate rules will negatively impact the performance of your machine. People read these like the Bible, although they forget that the Bible was written a long time ago. I mean, this thing here is written in 2001. That's when you used VHS cassettes, and that's when you were the only DVD in a local local video rental shop here next to me was Pelican Brief. I remember it was the only DVD because I happened to have a DVD station and no one else seemed to have one. So I wanted to rent something, and the only thing available was Pelican Brief. But anyway, I mean, like a lot of things have happened since, so you don't have to worry about this. Your Apple Pencil has now more CPU power than your computer had at that time when this was a problem. Okay, so we'll just have that on, and then this will actually check at the file types. AppLocker will check if something is executable or not, so the detection is very different. And then this we can also mandate who can choose who are trusted publisher for certificate-based rules. And then we have a basic setting saying just set as default the disallowed, which means that we won't allow things unless they are allow listed. We can say let's not deny anything unless they are deny listed, or we can have this weird thing where we allow things to run as long as you're not an admin. And then it basically works just like this. Okay, so what we do is we will just start a command prompt here, and I'll just gonna run it as a limited user. So this will be my student 25 in my environment. And then we can test things, whether things work or not. So we'll just, I think we have temp folder here, and let's see what we have here. So now currently I can run psexec because psexec is actually in my program files x86. Oh, I actually had a copy of it, so it didn't. So why is this not running? And this is the weird thing about SRP. This is an implication for it being older than I even remembered, which means that this actually has a default rule for program files, but it does not include program files x86. Okay, so if I'll try something else than psexec, so what will, oh, sorry, forgot the rule, create the rule, so path rule, and we will say from now on, please allow C program files. Okay, so that'll allow psexec to run. Now you can see it running because it's actually coming from my path. It's pointing to C program file sysint. But if I copy program files x86 sysint sec and just copy it here and run it from here, it won't run. Okay. Well, if I'm a limited user, I can't do it the other way. I can't copy my executables into a trusted location like that. So now if I run Notepad, that should work because it's in Windows. Oh, even that doesn't work. Well, this is a very weird thing about the old software restriction policies because it plays by file types, and it actually also limits the LNK files, which are your shortcuts. So if I'll remove that, now we can actually run Notepad as well. But that's very different than AppLocker, which actually sees if the memory page where that data is loaded to is marked as executable. So it's a very different mechanism on identifying things. It can't do auditing. It just turns on like that. I couldn't choose whether it's going to log things or enforce things. It just does. It instantly starts blocking things from running. So AppLocker, which is in box for the enterprise versions, and you can have it for the professional if you manage it with Intune, is way better. So it allows us to do both blacklisting and whitelisting, aka deny listing and allow listing. It can target computers as well, which means that we can target a computer because it's a privileged access workstation or a kiosk or some special machine, but we can also control people on it. On these machines, our developers can run things from the cdev folder. All software needs to be pre-approved, so there is kind of a hidden deny all rule at the end. It is a native feature of Windows 7. It actually is a service called AppID service that is used to identify all binary that runs, and then it has a kernel mode driver that will actually prevent something from running. But if you are an admin, you own your kernel and you can bypass this. So this, like SRP version 1, will not work against admins. Now, the good thing about AppLocker is it supports inheritance, which means we can create rule sets that are based on the whole company being denied of running certain very dangerous binaries. And then we can organizational unit by unit, we can say these are the allowed applications in this organization's part and this organization's part. So inheritance. Just be careful with it because there's two different things. AppLocker is always auditing or enforcing, which means we can first audit what would be prevented if we started blocking things, or we can block things. Now this main switch, whether it's audited or enforced, this main switch, this is inherited separately. So if at an upper level you say that this is enforced, and then at the lower level you say it's audited, it'll be audited. So the last setting that hits it will be the setting. Okay, so the main switches of enforced or audited, this will be separately inherited, and then the rules on the other hand will be merged. So 23 rules from here and 10 rules here. We'll have 33 rules here. And the enforcement, because it wasn't configured anywhere, the default is enforcement. So you have to look at two different things that get inherited. After that, we create super simple rules. So the default rules for AppLocker are please allow only things from program files and please allow only things from Windows. Just think about that. I'll tell you, you can only run code from C Windows and C program files and C program files x86, and then I remove your admin rights. How would you run malware on that machine? I think some of you know the answer. There are two threats to AppLocker. One is bad applications destroying your security, and the other thing is lol bins, living off the land binaries. But we'll talk about that in a second. Now, after we've done AppLocker's basic settings of choosing either to just audit, so that's how you start every project, by seeing what you have, so we won't block people from running things when we turn it on. So that's the main switch. And then we create rules. And these rules we can create based on files or folders. We can create them based on the publishers or even hash values. I have some main rules for any of my project. One of those main rules is keep the containers, not items. If you see yourself thinking hash values, stop. If you see yourself thinking that you're going to list executables inside of a folder, stop. Okay? Instead of listing all binaries inside a Windows folder, you just list the Windows folder and make sure no one can add things to it. Okay, so it's very important. Always audit all your installations with access check. Access check, I have some pre-built documentation for you on that on these slides, but you have to make sure, for example, I just had a customer that had AppLocker and it said you can run anything from Windows because then admins can't, non-admins cannot add things to the Windows folder. But then we had a small company somewhat related to security, and I think they also have quite a good quality assurance department. At this company, it's a small company, it's called Cisco, okay? This Cisco has a client software that has a log file folder called Internet Logs, which they put into Windows, which is absolutely against all the rules of software development for Windows. And they add limited users write privileges to that folder so that they can write to the log files. well, they destroy Windows security while doing it. So now anyone, even without admin rights, can put their binary into that internet logs folder and start running things from it. This happens to program files all the time. I have a few examples on my machine: Epic Games, Minecraft launcher. As I said, I do everything on my laptop. So those will mess up your program files security by adding everyone full control to those folders. You have to hunt those down and you have to make them exceptions to your rules. And remember, none of this works unless you got rid of admin rights. But to be fair, in Windows, in Windows security, nothing is enforced if you give them admin rights. The book in 1993 says in Windows there is no security. I mean the book, meaning NT 3.1 user guide, says there is no security in Windows if you have admin rights. So just stop trying to fight against windmills. If that's your case, go first back to the first webinar we did. Here is a great free consultation for you. This is a 4-rule AppLocker rule set that kills more than 950,000 pieces of malware per day. Just let that sink in. Per day, you can kill 950,000 at a minimum. I'm not exaggerating here. I'm actually just giving you very low numbers just to be sure that I'm not fooling you. Because this says that you can run anything from program files on Windows, admins can run anything, and then on top of that you can run only signed code. And 95% of malware per day is not signed, which means 1 million pieces of malware per day, which only 50,000 are signed. Think about that. You have your funnel here. AppLocker will first clear out 950,000 things without thinking about it, and then you can concentrate on the 50,000 with your anti-malware and whatever kind of features you have. As said, I'm not exaggerating, because that rule, to be honest, actually says that it has to be signed by a trusted certificate, and those you will only find a few per day. That's like when they had attacks against the Iranese nuclear plants. Stuxnet. It got in because it was signed by Realtek, a stolen certificate from Realtek. That's serious. But that's only a few cases per day. So my 950,000 is actually very small compared to reality. Okay. Some service providers might have it easier by just signing code whenever it arrives and delivering it to their customers, because you have to only touch one Active Directory, so you add a rule to TeamViewer. But a service provider might have 100 Active Directories to take care of, so it actually might make more sense to split apart the TeamViewer binaries and sign them again and then distribute it to their clients, because then they only have to do it in one place. So this one here is the same as the previous one, but I only trust code signed by my own company. Is the first thing on your mind that this will not work because you have so old code that cannot be signed? Sign it yourself. You can do that for free with Sign Tool or with PowerShell. Stop trying to make the world better by calling your, well, you should call them as well, but I mean, don't let it stop you that your devs tell you that they can't sign things. Sign it yourself. $200 for a year for a public signing certificate, and if you have your own CA or any way you can do a self-signed certificate, it won't cost you anything. Few last notes here about AppLocker. This is an example policy that I start with for my customers, and here are a few things that will make my customers' security department jump up and down, because I tell them that I trust everything about Microsoft or any application signed by Microsoft, and they're always, the security people will start jumping up and down, and they're saying like, Sami, stop, you cannot trust everything from Microsoft. We have to list what we trust. I mean, we don't trust the whole company, we just want to trust some parts of it. And I'm like, dude, this is called Microsoft AppLocker. Okay, I mean, if you are not going to trust Microsoft, you can't run Windows. So I will do it for you, but we will install Linux everywhere. Okay? Because that's the most hypocritical thing I have ever heard, is someone running Microsoft Windows and saying, I don't trust Microsoft. Okay? Same happens here. I have an HP laptop and I'm trusting HP. Oh, no, HP has had malware delivered. They are bad. You can't trust HP. Dude, they own the firmware. They run at ring -2, 2 levels below your kernel. They run what the hell they want. You can't do anything about it. Plus, that's even more hypocritical than not trusting Microsoft is not trusting HP and running their laptop. So if you, as my customer, don't want to trust HP or Microsoft, we will sell all HP machines, buy Lenovo and install Linux instead of Windows, and then I agree. Okay. I also deny PowerShell from my limited users because PowerShell is the most used mechanism for doing any malicious acts in a company. That's just a tip. And I also limit them from talking to the network. So that's actually an extra tip for you. But if you can't limit PowerShell, I only limit it from limited users. I use it for admins all the time daily. Okay. But if you can't block it, at least make sure your PowerShell can't talk to the enemy. So make Windows firewall rules saying that PowerShell can only talk to your internal network, and for the people working with Azure, to the Azure tenant. That will save you from a lot of trouble. It is needed by AppLocker project itself, so just don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that admin shouldn't run AppLocker. So admin shouldn't run PowerShell. It's prevented by AppLocker, but only from limited users. There are some tips, like I said, so there are some slides I'm not even going to go through. Hardening wise, you should follow Twitter because there's a lot of smart people there. I'm trying to hide myself there and fool you in following me as well. That will tell you when AppLocker is leaking. So I'm not saying you're out of work because you deployed AppLocker, because you have to keep AppLocker safe. Also, there are lists here for how to make sure that your program files and Windows folders are not leaking, because you have to build some exceptions based on that. There are also some known binaries that need to be prevented by AppLocker because they are known as living off the land binaries, lolbins. And you can use those to run other things, which means we have to block them. More links, tools that can help you with the project. As said, you need some help from your firewall because there are certain things we can't block. They are needed by Windows. So my rule is if you can't block, then you contain. Okay, so if you can't block, then you contain. This is the smartest thing you can do. Make sure PowerShell can't talk to anywhere outside of your network, except for those who need access to Azure. As said, you can manage this via Intune if you want to, but it's not as intuitive as the group policy editor is. You have to split your XML file into these 5 different rule sets. You have to kind of distribute the XML into 5 different locations, but doable and a lot cheaper because you don't need enterprise. To end my part of this, there is a thing in Windows 10 called device card, and I get this question all the time. And some of the Microsoft salespeople are very bad at this because they have been going around the world saying and telling everyone that device card is AppLocker on steroids. And I have to say, I totally agree. And most people should not take steroids. They are very bad for you. Okay, only in extreme conditions are they good for you, and even legal. AppLocker is great. Use that. Device card, aka Windows Defender Application Control, is for single-purpose machines that are meant to shoot missiles or take down data centers or ATMs. Just don't spend your time. It's not near ready because AppLocker has the decision of managing things with the GUI or PowerShell. On the other hand, this is Windows Defender Application Control's management matrix, which more looks like someone shot with a shotgun on the wall. Far from ready. stay away from it. Microsoft has cool additions to it that you could trust SCCM, you could trust the Microsoft pre-built list. Honestly, not there yet. Maybe in the future, just use AppLocker, okay? Now that you have AppLocker, that will only stabilize the current situation, okay? So we can keep the scrap out of your network. When people try to run Firefox from their browser, it won't run because AppLocker won't allow you to run anything from your profile unless it's whitelisted separately. That's great, but you still have to, but luckily you can concentrate on a smaller amount now because you only have those allow listed apps there, but you still have to keep those up to date because we still have vulnerabilities in those apps that you do allow. But this is a great segue for me to pass the torch on to Juha. So I will head on to the Q&A area and see what we have there while listening to Juha continue with this. So I'll get back to you later on, and thanks.
Thank you very much, Sami. Once again, really excellent stuff on how to protect your applications there. So as mentioned, I will continue to show you a little bit about how to update the applications there. So as Sami mentioned, yeah, you need to allow your applications, and for example, in the simple rules, you allow the application so that, okay, the applications that are, the binaries are in the program files folder, that's okay. So you need to then decide how you are going to install the applications, who has permissions to install the applications, and normally, of course, you would be doing the deployment system there. All right. So once you have allow listed your organization, the kind of applications, then you need to make the decision on your applications, how you will do the initial app deployment there. So basically you have two different ways to do that. You are able to force the deployment, so the administrator makes the decision for the user. These applications you need to have on the devices. So the decision of the initial deployment, whether it's administrators or whether it's users, both are fine options there. I think the current trend nowadays is to go more with available for users. So each user will make the decision if I'm going to need the application or not. Because once again, on the security side, it's not good to deploy every application to every device. But of course, in this case, you need to see that when I'm talking about making the application available for the user, I'm not meaning that you are going to install the application for the user profile. The installation itself actually is always done for the device, but this is just how the initial deployment is triggered, whether it's triggered by decision made by administrator or whether it's a decision made by the users. But anyway, whether the decision is made by admin or the user, the application always needs to end up in our lifecycle management process where we'll update the application. Because as Sami mentioned, if everything is allowed from the program file folder, we need to make sure that the things that we get into our program files folder are secure. And of course, we know that especially the smaller third-party application, these are updated a lot because there are a lot of things or holes to fix there. So you need to fix those applications and update those applications. So very important. Whether the initial deployment is by admin or by user, you need to make sure that the applications are actually up to date. And of course, like Sami already mentioned previously, you need to know what applications you want to allow. So you need to have the inventory there and make the decisions, what are the applications that are made available and what are the applications distributed for the users. So there is a lot of kind of benefits for doing the application management. So benefits for the users, benefits for the IT department, and also benefits for the organization. And for this Zero Trust, I think the biggest benefit here is that when you update your applications, you are making your environment much more secure. So the security in this content is the most critical thing why you need to update. And also, why the organization nowadays are a little bit more kind of doing installations for the users and also pushing the installations for the users. We want to just use the applications on the devices where needed. So we don't want to install everything on every device. We just need the applications to be installed on the device where they are actually needed. And then we are going to protect those with AppLocker so that these applications are the ones that are able to execute it there. But to do that, you need to have the inventory, what applications to allow, what applications to force for the devices, what applications to make available there. And then, of course, you need to make the decision how you are going to deploy the initial deployment. Is it forced or do you want to make that an available installation? But anyway, whatever the installation method is, then you need to update. And once again, the most important thing in the application lifecycle management when you think about security is the way that you update the applications. So we need to patch them. And of course, sometimes the application update is a future update, not security critical, but sometimes and many times for the third-party applications, it's a security critical update. So you need to make that faster and you need to make the update fast on your environment. And of course, sometimes even someone removes the application. So that is, of course, one part of the application lifecycle management. So what is the reason why organizations are moving forward for letting the users start the initial installation? Is because one of the reasons is that these updates, when they are forced by admins, they annoy the end users. So it might be so that the update is coming to the device on the wrong time. They are losing time because waiting the application there, and there are too much kind of application updates done for the applications that the user doesn't even need on the device. Those needs to be updated also. So when we move for the initial deployment, for making applications available, we just make sure that we need to update the applications that the users are actually using on the devices. And to make sure that you are able to update the applications, you would be able to do that also manually using, for example, your existing deployment system, but it takes a lot of time to do manually because these updates, they are coming in high frequency. So there's a lot of these updates. And for each of the updates, you need to actually do a lot of things. You need to make sure that you are packaging the applications and testing the applications. You need to upload the packages to your management system and then configure the deployment and the deployment steps, how you want to deploy the application into your environment. And that repeats for every new version that is made available. And of course, also in addition to that, you need to monitor what are the applications that needs to be updated, what new versions have been published and so on. So a lot of work if you need to do that manually. So let's go back to the kind of the starting slide here. So we made the decision that, okay, we need to allow our list applications. So we use the AppLocker for allowing our applications. And then we make this decision about the initial application distribution, whether it's a forced installation by admin. So then we will normally install the application silently on the background for the devices, or whether the application is made available for the users. And then the users would use, for example, company portal in case of Intune and Software Centero, for example, for the SCCM environment. So the users just starts the installation manually from there. But the installation itself, once again, it's always done for the device level there. But now we have the application somehow deployed, the initial deployment. We need to also update those. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Centero Software Manager. That's a service that you are able to use to actually automate the deployment and the updating process completely. So the Software Manager has been around for some time, and the service that is actually running background on the Software Manager is our enterprise-ready packaging service, and that is something that we have been doing already from 2007, so making sure that the applications are ready for the enterprise deployments. And then we introduced the CSM service to automate the deployments. And we have several kind of different integrations to existing Microsoft-based systems. So whether it's an on-premises system or whether it's a SaaS application, you are able to use our CSM to make the integration, for example, to the SCCM or Microsoft Intune platforms. All right, so I want to show you a little bit about the Microsoft Intune, and because the trend nowadays is to make applications available for the users, and we will use the company portal for that. So if I'm going to share you a management portal from our side, so this is the Centero Software Manager management portal, and when you have the CSM for Intune service available there, and if I quickly go through and show you the deployment processes made available on this customer, I'm able to see that, okay, I have a deployment process called available applications. And several applications selected to this deployment process, one of the applications being Notepad++ application. So that is application that will be made available on our environment for every user, so they are able to go in the company portal and just select, I want to install the Notepad++. And this works all right and okay with just Intune service. You just make the application there and make the installation available. But okay, now we have installed some application or some version of the Notepad++ to our environment. How about the updates of that? And that is something that the Intune service does not yet have. SCCM, for example, already has a solution for that. But for example, Intune service doesn't have that yet. So what we have built into our software manager is the feature called application groups. And the idea here is that you are able to link an application into a Azure AD group. And the configuration in the background or the background services make sure that whenever the users installs this application, the device will be actually included into our group that is linked to the management rule. So for example, the first on the list here, we are able to see that we have an application called Notepad++, and we have selected that, okay, I have a Azure AD group called Notepad++, and what happens now on the background is whenever someone installs the Notepad++ application from the company portal, our service will add the device into this Azure AD group here. And then these Azure AD groups you are able to use anywhere, of course, because this just contains the devices there. But what I have been using here, I have linked this to a deployment process, and the deployment process is called Notepad++ here. And if I quickly go into to see the deployment processes here, so back in the deployment process page, I'm able to see that, okay, I have the Notepad++ deployment process here, and it's only for the Notepad++ application. And when I go in and see the deployment process steps, what I have here, I have a single deployment step that says that, okay, this deployment is required, and it's targeting now our Azure AD group that contains the devices where someone has manually started the installation. And now every time when we release a new version of Notepad++ into our software manager service, the required installation kicks in and deploys the latest version also for these devices where the initial deployment was done by the user from the company portal. All right, so if you are interested of doing a trial for the Centero Software Manager, whether it's a Intune service or SCCM related service, you are able to go into our web pages, software-manager.com, and here's the free trial link that you are able to click, and then just fill in the information, and then you will receive automatically an email message containing the information how to log into our management portal and so on. So if you are not able to see the email message there in a couple of minutes, then verify your junk mail if the email is there. But that email contains all the information, so you are able to automatically move forward and start your trial phase for any of the software manager integrations available here. All right, so once again, to make our webinars more better in the future, and we are planning to release a new webinars in the future also. So we want you to fill a survey, a short survey for today's webinar, and the survey is still open for 1 hour. So you have time to fill in the survey there. And if you create and leave your survey with your contact information, then you are automatically included in our winning for these 2 Amazon gift cards that we are going to send for someone who has left or filled in the survey with contact information. All right, so you have these links there, and they are posted also on the webinar chat there. So please fill in our survey so we will get the webinars even better in the future. But yeah, now time to go to our questions and answers. So Sami, what kind of questions we have today?
Well, we do have a lot of comments and questions about me sharing my XML files for pre-built AppLocker rules, which I always get. And I'm going to be the most common consultant ever, because we all know that the most favorite word for any consultant is "it depends." Okay, so I sadly can't build you baselines that would be great for you. I have XML files that I built, and I give them on my courses because I teach people how to use them. But the problem is, if I build something, I'm really sorry, but I am too old now for anymore taking the chance that you get breached and then you come and say that you were breached although I had built your baselines. Well, I can't build your AppLocker policies or your baselines for you. I can build them with you, but not for you. So I'm really sorry, I won't take the chance of giving those out and then you not taking care of those anymore and being breached. And then it looks like it's my bad. But I will help you out with those if you want, okay? If you want to send me email, sami@adminize.com, or even better, find me on Twitter, Sami Laiho, and you can ask me, and I might give you those, but I'm not going to distribute those out like here for the whole crowd. Then the next questions about, well, we had questions about WDAC, which is Windows Defender Application Control. I think I took care of that quite well. Like AppLocker and Steroids, and I'm sorry, but Steroids are not legal. There was a question related to that, which is AppLocker enough for privileged access workstations? If you ask me, yes. I can take care of my security at many different fronts, and AppLocker is one of the most important ones. And I think if you do your security well in every front, AppLocker is just fine. But if you are at a situation where you have to log on as an admin, for example, then there are certain things I do. First of all, Windows Defender Application Control is a good idea then, because it's the only thing that is actually done at the hypervisor level. So it really changes the execution bit of a memory page, which happens below the operating system, which means it applies to admins as well. It's the same computer where I'll say you have to have your BitLocker equipped with a PIN code. So there are certain more restrictions put in place if you log on as an admin. There was a tip about AppLocker being available for Windows 10 Pro. I will mention it because they mentioned Sandy, and Sandy is of course a very, very great Finnish MVP. So I will mention it. But that was exactly what I was talking about, saying that if you use Intune, you can use it with Pro. Is there anything missing in AppLocker context if I only have Win 10 Pro plus Intune versus Win 10 Enterprise with Intune? Not really. You're missing the great management tools, but technically it's the same. It's just managed in a different way. Related straight to that was a question about, will Windows event log forwarding work in a native cloud environment? No, it will not. So then you have to use log analytics or something like that. So some sort of a service that can capture, or Sentinel or whatever. I mean, some sort of a CM solution that can capture those AppLocker logs for you. Might be a good idea nowadays in these zero trust environments where you're not supposed to be tied to always having a VPN connection to your network. So not a bad idea, but you have to still somehow take care of it yourself. It's not something that Microsoft gives out as a service. And then let me see where we were. Totally unrelated. Sami, any book recommendations for Windows debugging? There is a myth, which I'm sadly expecting to be busted, that in the end of July 2021, Windows Internal 7th edition book 2 would finally be out. That would be, of course, the main one. Hi, if an environment is Azure AD only, no local admins, has AppLocker, PowerShell constrained language mode, no on-premises servers, should we still be worried about end users, non-admins having access to PowerShell? Well, yes. I mean, in the early days, we would say that PSXSec, it was usually blocked by all anti-malware, but we would say it's not a problem because PSXSec would only work if you had admin rights. But PowerShell works with limited users, and currently one of our biggest threat is ransomware, which means we can even by taking away your admin rights, we can't really block you from writing to your own data. Or if you have tried that, that's a very I mean, that's a nice project to have. Tell all your end users that from now on, all your My documents will be read only. I mean, that they probably will love you for that. So I would, in all honesty, I think it's a little bit counterproductive. So sadly, PowerShell as a limited user, even running in constrained language mode, could still be easily used to manipulate the user's own data. So two options, either blocking it from users when the limited users are not admins, when you don't, and in that case, you really don't have to worry about constrained language mode that much because it doesn't apply to admins in that scenario anyway. And also, if you can't do that, our slides had recommendations on how to protect it. Plus, at least make sure it, I mean, the idea there is you get a malicious thing on your machine and it's controlled by someone outside of your company, either by capturing your encryption key to a server or having a command center somewhere. And when you block PowerShell from communicating to internet, you might not block the ransomware from getting in, but it can't get any commands. So if you can't block, then you contain. Any links about event forwarding in regards of AppLocker for Centero managed cloud-only Windows 10 devices? I have absolutely no idea. Does Juha have any comments on that?
I can take note for that. So for the cloud managed clients, so if you are using our CSM for cloud, we have a possibility to collect the information from the event viewer. So that is something that you would be able to then do, and then just collect the information, will be posted back to our back end, and then you are able to use our management portal for the reporting part then.
That sounds very good. Then this is the original question was in voice over IPsec, so I'll just translate or read this Teemu's translation here. Translation, what should I consider other than admin privileges if enabling AppLocker on servers compared to normal workstations? Well, in servers, if you don't log on as admin, then it works exactly the same as it would for an endpoint. But if you have to log on as an admin, then the default rules are really not that good for you because the default rule says that you can run anything if you're an admin. Also, you might really, on a server, if it's just an infrastructure server that really doesn't change that much, it might really be a candidate for steroids. So that might be a thing that doesn't change that much. And it might be possible for you to actually manage it with Windows Defender Application Control, because those servers are not like the workstations. If you use Windows Defender Application Control, your service desk will be so I'd say they will be having so many tickets, and they are so slow in restoring operations when something doesn't work. So they can't take care of tens of thousands of workstations. But servers might be a very different case because they're not really experienced by the end users in that sense. We are sorry for going overtime. I know. It was Teemu's comment. Maybe not a question, but my tips regarding AppLocker. Daniel Persson. If that would be Daniel Pearson, I would be I would know you. So maybe not a question, but my tips regarding AppLocker is to make sure that the admins that manage the rules must know what can be allowed and not. This is the big decision always, the same as with like one-time admin rights. Someone has to make the decision whether you give those rights or not. This is the same idea. We want to run things from seed dev. Is it a good idea or not? At least not good for everyone, but maybe you have to do that for your devs. So yes, of course, that's a very good tip. Any comments about software companies that update nowadays their softwares automatically in company environment? I want to master the updates, packaging and distribution and testing, etc. And I am gonna I have so many of these to take care from the AppLocker's perspective that, of course, it's a very serious and very difficult thing to manage because we kind of like trust the delivery mechanism, and we don't have visibility into that much. But I think I'm gonna leave this to Juha and ask for Juha's opinion.
Yeah, that's a good question, and of course it depends on the level of control that you want to have. And as mentioned, in organization level, you usually want to control when the applications are distributed, when the updates are distributed, how do you want to test? Do you have one test phase or two different test phases before pushing out the updates for each and every device there? So yeah, usually an organization environment, we don't want to rely on the automatic updates that are included in the software itself. And of course, for example, for the AppLocker, it really depends. For example, if the application installs a separate service that runs on the background and the service has admin access, so then that service can update the binaries on that device automatically if that's something that the admin wants to do. But many of these applications actually work in the way that when the user starts the application, it will just find if we have a new version available, and if the new version is available, it may be automatically downloaded on the background, but the update process will start by the user's permissions. And of course, we don't have the admin access for users, as we stated earlier already, so no admin access for the users. So on those cases, it wouldn't even work. So to just make it simple, I would go in the organization environment so that manage your applications, find what applications you want, what you need to update, and then control your updates in your environment.
All right. As we don't really have a hard limit on this, I'm just going to keep on going because I still have some time to stay here. So AppLocker, can we allow users to use inbuilt update on apps? It really relates to the previous question, but purely from AppLocker's perspective, of course, if you allow the built-in update mechanisms, then it depends on how the code is updated. If the code is updated using all signed code, then it might run if you have allowed the whole company to be trusted, which in most cases I do. If it's a hash rule, then it won't run anymore after the update. So it depends on how you use your rules. Regarding best practices, what top 3 places would you keep an eye on to keep up to date with zero trust or securing endpoint apps if you have a top 3? Well, of course, you should keep an eye on Centero's LinkedIn page and my Twitter page. I have a lot of lists on my courses about different people to follow on Twitter. I don't have them at hand here, but Twitter is my main channel for new information. I do like, although I'm not using Cisco's products for this, but I do like actually Cisco's webpage on Zero Trust. And then Microsoft, there's so many questions about the privileged access workstation models. For example, Microsoft has a new documentation called RAMP, Rapid Modernization Plan documentation that you should read. It's really, really good. About inheritance, does GPO-based AppLocker run over locally made AppLocker rules, or can you do so-called hardening only with one computer directly with GPO-based rules? I actually don't use local GPO. I don't use local AppLocker rules in combination with domain. So I would have to say that I have not even tested it, but based on my own machine having information coming from Intune and my local, that would at least work. So I would assume that with the GPO as well. I really don't want to have any local management for clients. I mean, I don't like the concept, so I really can't answer that. And then we had a long list of all the links that we spoke about. And where does auditing and asset inventory management come on the Zero Trust things to do list? Well, it's one of the most important ones. We have only spoken about 2 core concepts now about Zero Trust. If you go back to the first webinar we did, there's a more thorough list on what Zero Trust itself is. But that we kind of missed on this webinar, as we kind of like went through the basics on the first one, and then we dug into the principle of least privilege. Now we are at the application control, and of course this is one of the most important things to keep shadow IT in order. But you do, I don't know if you missed it, but at one slide I did mention that the most important thing in any security environment is up-to-date hardware inventory and up-to-date software inventory. You can't protect things unless you know what you're protecting. Those are also CIS institutions' number 1 and number 2 rules. They have the 20 things to do to block 99.99% of malicious acts. So those are number 1 and number 2, not just my list. I think I went finally fast enough to get into the end of the questions so far. So maybe this is a good time for us to call this a day. I'll take my opportunity now to just thank everyone for joining, and thanks Centero for hosting. It was a pleasure again, and I hope to see you soon again.
Thank you very much, Sami. Yeah, same here. So it was a pleasure to organize this webinar, and topics are really, really good, and hopefully we are able to do even more in the future. And also like to thank you everyone who's joined to the session and the webinar. And yeah, the recording is available later on our social media, so follow that and you are able to get your hands also to the recorded session there. But yeah, no more questions at the moment, I guess. There was no more questions there, so we are now ending this webinar. So thank you for everyone for attending.